Let's go now to my panel. We'll start though with the issue of energy, because last week, you may recall I spoke to an energy market analyst, Saul Kavonic. We were discussing Chris Bowen's latest change to net zero policy and the energy transition agenda. After our show, Kavonic wrote that Labor is now well down the road towards a predominantly government-controlled and funded energy system. Now, government funding means taxpayer funding. He said the government's resorting to taxpayer money to bail it out of the energy market mess it's created. He also noted that the new policy is an admission by the government that they are worried about blackouts and trying to fix it. But without using the best solution, he says, which is gas, it's been ruled out because the government has to pander to the Greens. I might add too, this whole policy is uncosted. Joining me now to discuss this and more, a final panel for the night, former Resources Minister, Liberal National Party MP for the seat of Hinkler in Queensland, Keith Pitt, and Sky News host, Corey Bernardi. Well, I don't think there's much there that Saul Kavonic's got wrong, has he, Keith? I think he's nailed it.
Oh, Peter, Chris Bowen, Blackout Bowen, he's a bit of a miracle worker, this guy. So what he says is the cheapest form of energy production, which is intermittent wind and solar, is now so cheap that it needs an unknown bucket load of the Australian taxpayers' money, which is a secret, to get anyone to build it. He is going to guarantee returns to people like industry super funds and overseas investors to get this stuff built in Australia because no one will do it. So I think that says everything the Australian taxpayer should know. These processes shouldn't go ahead. It's intermittent, it's unreliable, it's not going to be the cheapest form, and no one is talking about the cost of transmission, which is around half of your power bill.
And the unpopularity of transmission once it rolls out to a paddock or a country town near you. That's the other thing that's biting them, particularly on the eastern seaboard. Corey, a Resolve poll out today says that less than 1 in 5 Australians oppose ending the prohibition on nuclear power in Australia, which means 4 out of 5 of us say, yeah, it's about time we end the ban. So will we see change?
I certainly hope so, but I think we might need to see a change of government, Peter. I mean, that 1 in 5 is the Greens voters and the hard left of the Labor Party, including Chris Bowen himself. This is just an extraordinary failure to allow Australia to consider options. I've always argued it should have happened during the coalition years, but now, with 4 out of 5 Australians thinking removing the ban is okay. It doesn't mean we're going to have nuclear power stations. It just means we can actually put forward feasibility studies, you can examine it, and you can see, is this going to work for our country? It works everywhere else in the world, so it would work here, but not under Chris Bowen.
No, because you're not going to get any corporate player or private sector player, public sector player, put their hand up to do anything in this space if there's a prohibition in the parliament. You've got to get rid of that and allow the market to at least put forward some bids. Talk to me about what happened in the Port of Newcastle over the weekend, Keith, because someone said to me, I think it was 500,000 tonnes of coal could not get out. That's worth about $100 million. Is that accurate?
I think that's probably close, Peter, but this group should change their name to Plastic Lovers Australia. They're out protesting the petrochemical industry and their plastic kayaks. They've got their plastic paddles. The leader of the Greens is in his neoprene wetsuit. It's all made from petrochemical products. And what are they doing? They're stopping Australia's export industry, the biggest one in the country, that employs tens of thousands of people and continue to knock around our reputation. We've got the situation now where our long-standing trading partners and investors, Japan, think there's sovereign risk in this country. And what's the government doing? Well, the Labor government is giving money to the Environmental Defender's Office to support these types of activities and to take individual projects to the courts and knock them out. You can't have it both ways. They're either pro-resources or they're not.
No. Corey, we saw some reports over the weekend. I think this is the government reading the tea leaves, certainly in their internal polling, that we've reached peak migration. They're going to start to track it down. They're talking about putting caps and perhaps even taxing international students. We've seen those electoral results in the Netherlands. Indeed, we've seen them in Argentina, but I think the Netherlands relates specifically to the issue of illegal migration. We can see it really biting in the UK. Where do you see this issue going here in Australia?
Well, I think the government have read the tea leaves a little bit, but what we've got in Argentina, which is an economic issue, but also in the Netherlands, which was basically a cultural and a migration issue, we've got people recognising that what the mainstream media promotes, what the major political parties promote, what this orthodoxy about, cancelled culture of anyone with an alternative view, they've led us to a point where the West is very, very weak, where government decisions and policies are taking people backwards. And we know in this country, Peter, that the huge migration issues are propping up the GDP figures for the government to make the government look good, but they're making Australians go backwards from a per capita income. We're in a per capita recession. And what they call populism, or they say is far right politics, unfortunately, it's just a backlash to the failures of politics. And it was identifiable, Peter. I went and did a study tour of migration in Europe. I met with Geert Wilders. I'm proud to call him a friend because he was far ahead of the curve. You cannot repair a cultural balance sheet as easy as you can an economic one. And we're heading for a disaster on both counts in this country.
All right, let's go to that. Stay with that issue, the issue of the Nazi salute, Keith. The coalition will move amendments to ban the Nazi salute this week. Now, it's unclear whether Labor's going to support your amendment. They indicated, I think, the last time the Parliament sit, they would not. Have you got an update?
Well, Peter, when was the last time that you would even imagined or thought for a second you'd have to convince the Labor Party to put this ban in place, particularly in the current circumstances? I just find it quite incredible that they're even resisting to start with. So I don't have a new update for you, mate, I'm sorry, but we'll be putting through the amendments that we think are right. And once again, I mean, Julian Leeser stood up in the Parliament today and spoke about a former member. And here's someone who's at the heart of the challenges we're seeing in Sydney right now. And these are discussions I never thought I'd see in Australia. I really didn't.
Yeah, well, we'll watch that one closely. I agree with you, Keith Pitt. Thank you for your time, Corey Bernardi. Great to have you on the program.